Hey, it's Ryan with motorcycle.com here at the 2021 Aprilia Tuono factory here. So the story of the 2021 Aprilia Tuono V4 is more of an incremental change. It's not a big overhaul, but what they've done between the two models is you have the Tuono V4, that's it, no RR, nothing else, and that they've actually made it more of a streetable, kind of even touring. They call it hyper naked touring. And then you have the factory model, which is a more pointed, sport focused machine. So with the standard model, you now get a taller windscreen, lower passenger pegs, you get a little bit more wind protection around the front, and they've actually made the subframe more robust on the standard model to accommodate a passenger, and even Aprilia makes some asymmetrical luggage that you can put on that. So on the factory model, it's a little bit of a lighter subframe, more like the RSV4. And then you also have a lower handlebar, which is kind of the standard, what it was before on the factory model. Other than that, it's going to be pretty much unchanged. You have a 200 section rear tire versus the 190 on the standard model. And then from the standard model, you get SAC suspension and a SAC steering damper. On the factory model, you get the electronic Öhlins Smart EC 2.0 electronic suspension front and rear. So that's going to be tied to your ride modes and everything out. We'll get into that in a moment. But that's kind of what separates the Tuono V4, the standard model, to the Aprilia Tuono V4 factory. But for 2021, changed on both models, you now get a new swing arm, which is made out of 3 pieces versus the old 7-piece. So it's quite a bit more rigid. Aprilia quotes 48% stiffer at the rear axle, which is quite a bit, obviously. Some of my colleagues that have had a chance to take the RSV4 on the track said, which has the same swing arm, said it is immensely noticeable, and it does feel it gives you a lot better feel. It's supposed to be way more rigid. And if you kind of look at the previous model, it's almost like it's inverted, where that triangle is kind of on the bottom. And you've got a lot of adjustment as far as the wheelbase, considerable amount down there. Street riding, I couldn't tell you, it feels pretty much the same, but on the track it is supposed to kind of give better grip, so we'll see about that. You also get the new Morelli 11 MP ECU, which tied to these new electronics with an insane amount of adjustability with engine braking, the engine map, wheelie control, traction control, launch control, all of that stuff. And on the factory model, all of those ride modes are also tied to your suspension. But that new ECU allows the machine basically to function even at an even higher level. The way traction control works with everything else and works off the telemetry of everything is just a little bit more refined, and the ECU is now capable of doing all of that stuff at the same time. It's basically leveled up the electronics package. The motor is basically unchanged. Aprilia says it hasn't lost any power from the previous model, but it is now Euro 5, so we're good to go there as far as sales in Europe. But we ran the bike on the dyno, and it put out 155 horsepower at the rear wheel and 84 pound-feet of torque. And that's on a bike fully fueled with this Tuono V4 factory, weighs 471 pounds. So pretty good power to weight ratio. We already knew that. And the V4, I would say maybe it sounds a little more tame, maybe a little quieter than before, but as soon as you get up in the revs and that butterfly valve opens, you're reminded that this is an Aprilia V4. It's an incredible motor, and it's just so much fun. I'm really hoping we can get to the track with this thing soon, because it's been a lot of fun in the canyons, but we're only barely scraping the surface of its potential. Brembo M50 brakes. You're not getting the Stylemas, but again, on the street, we haven't had any issues. I imagine on the track, we're not gonna have any issues either. These are really great brakes, and they get the bike slowed down just fine. Again, if we get a chance to take this thing to the track, it's gonna be a different story. We can actually get into them a little bit harder, but as a street bike, this thing's great. The standard model, that's a little bit more upright, has better passenger accommodations. It's probably better around town and whatnot. It's not too big of a difference. In the canyons, I preferred being on the factory model just because of the lower handlebars. And as far as the electronics go, you have 6 ride modes. So you have, in the street setting, you have Sport, Tour, and User, which User is fully customizable. And then in the track settings, you have track and then 2 user customizable settings. So that really allows you to tailor everything just the way you want it. The ECU also allows the bike to have the bending headlights, they call it, that lights up your corner as you're going through the bends. I haven't really ridden the bike much at night, so I can't tell you how the lights work. They seem pretty bright, all LED, but we'll have more to say on that later with a more thorough test. I think a lot of people were commuting and touring on the Aprilia Tuono V4, the base model before, and now they've focused that model even more so towards being a more usable bike around town, touring. You know, maybe that's something a little more upright like the KTM Super Duke, or some of those other models that are maybe a little bit more upright, and some people will be into that. For me, it's the Tuono factory V4. When I'm on a Aprilia V4, all I want to do is rip. You know, this engine kind of goads you into getting into it, and it's a real easy way to lose your license. So as far as the cockpit goes, the Tuono V4 factory is actually closer to what it always had been. You know, it's more the same standard seating position, the bars are low, but what has changed is the fuel tank. It's still 4.9 gallons, but they changed the shape of it, and it allows you to kind of brace yourself better with your legs, so you don't have so much weight on your wrists, you know, especially if you're at the track and you're getting into the brakes hard. You can brace yourself with this tank quite a bit better. It does feel a little wider at the front, but even street riding, it helps you kind of just stay up more upright on the bike. Calling this a naked bike, a lot of people, you know, have to comment on the fairing, in which this fairing is also new. Kind of brought into line with the 660 models, and now the RC4, and then the Tuono is the last one to have this integrated wing kind of thing that's supposed to pull hot air away from you. Really, riding around in the canyons, the only place I noticed heat was kind of at my ankles, and it wasn't bad. Lane splitting on the way here this morning, it wasn't too bad. That's about where I could feel the heat, was around my ankles. In town, it's still a 1100cc V4, you know, it gets hot, you know, it is what it is. So for the Tuono V4 factory, you're looking at 19.5, and for the standard model, 16,000. So it's up 500 from before. For what you're getting, it's really not that big of a deal. And I think for 2021, there's some real reasons to consider a new bike. Thanks for watching the video. Like, comment, subscribe, let us know what you think, and head on over to motorcycle.com for the full write-up.